Okay. Thank you guys so much. So thanks a lot for joining us again for this additional information session and public hearing. So I'm going to talk about this a couple of times, but we're setting up the evening in a couple different parts. The first part's going to be an info session where we're going to try to provide a little bit of background on the proposed project and then answer some questions, hopefully from everybody who's on the line tonight. And then starting at 7 o'clock, or after you guys are done asking questions, whatever comes sooner, we're going to start the public hearing portion. So just kind of wanted to lay out that agenda for you right away at the beginning here. Just moving forward, we do have a lot of staff here to chat with people, and hopefully we have the right people on the line to answer questions. And if we don't happen to have the right person tonight, we can definitely get your questions answered offline if that is what works best. So I'm going to go ahead and just quickly introduce the staff that I have with us tonight. You're going to hear from most of them later on in the evening, but for the most part, you're going to be hearing from Ambrosia Brown, who is the permit engineer for the site. So who I have is Marianne Dolahanty. She's our Air Quality Division Director, and she's also the decision maker for this project. I've got Ambrosia Brown, who I mentioned earlier. She's the permit engineer for the site. So I also have with me tonight Susan Kilmer. And Susan Kilmer works in our air monitoring unit. So her staff and her run the stationary monitoring stations that are around the state. We have a little over 100 different monitors at about 40 plus locations around the state. So she helps with that. We also have Stephanie Heinspa, and she does our air modeling. So she basically, and you'll hear a little bit more about this later on too, but she works with computer models to look at proposed projects like the one that Ajax has and see where the pollutants might be going. So it's really important part of the project to kind of see, where those impacts might end up so that we aren't impacting communities around the site. Dan McGean, he is the inspector for that area. He does a lot of different facilities in Genesee County and especially in the Flint and Genesee Township area. So you'll be hearing from him. And then I have Keisha Williams. She is our toxicologist that is on the line tonight. So a lot of great staff with us today. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Matt Tomlinson. He's going to be my co-host tonight. So I'm going to be just doing some moderating of the meeting and handling the question and answer. And then I'm also going to be your hearing officer. So unfortunately, you might be hearing a lot from me tonight, and I apologize in advance for that. So just to go over this again, the kind of run of show for the meeting is going to be the information session. So that's where Amber is going to talk to you guys a little bit about some background on the project. She's going to talk a little bit about what Ajax was asking for, a lot of the review that she did to write the draft permit. And then we're going to open it up to question and answer. So really important about the question and answer is, just like it says, we'll be able to get questions from all of you, and we'll be able to provide answers. Hopefully, we're going to try to provide answers to everything that we possibly can. So there's a couple ways to go about asking those questions, and I'll talk about this again in a minute too, just to kind of reiterate, but you can type questions into your question box, and I'll show you where that is in a second. Or if you would rather verbalize your question, you can raise your hand and we'll try to unmute you so that you can ask it verbally. I just caution sometimes it takes a second, as Allie just found out, but we'll figure it out. We'll get through it. After that, so after the question and answer session at 7 o'clock or whatever comes sooner, so we're going to try to start that hearing right around 7 o'clock. We're going to start the hearing. So the difference between the hearing and the Q&A is during the hearing, we're going to be taking your comments. It's going to be Marianne and I listening, and we won't be responding. So if you ask a question as part of your comment, just be aware that we won't be responding to that question during the hearing portion. That's just to take those comments on the record for further review after the comment period is over. So after that, we're going to talk quickly about some other ways that you can submit an official comment. So the comment period, just so everyone's on the same page, is going to be open until midnight on September 7th. So tonight is not your last opportunity to submit a comment. If you're not ready to submit a comment tonight, there's plenty of other ways that you can do that, and you still definitely have time. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about where you can find other information. If you still are, maybe you're kind of new, or maybe you just found out about this, or maybe you just got more interested and you want to learn what other information we have out there about, dig a little bit deeper. I'll show you where to find that information. And then at the end, we're going to just talk really quickly about how you can contact our staff if you have any other questions. So Before I move on to the sort of housekeeping stuff, I do want to invite Mary Ann to give her a welcome message today. She usually likes to welcome everybody to the info sessions and hearings when we have them. So Mary Ann, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and do that.
Okay, I think I turned my video on and unmuted myself. So thanks, Jen, and thank you all for joining us tonight. Some of you may have attended our first public hearing, which we held on August 3rd, or the in-person comment session that we held on August 11th. For others, this may be your first chance to talk to us about the proposal by Ajax for a new asphalt plant and the draft permit my staff have put together for your review and comment. Whether this is your first, second, or third time engaging with us on this subject, we really appreciate you joining us. Tonight is another opportunity for us to hear from you regarding the proposed project that Ajax has submitted for the Air Quality Division's review. I definitely understand how much public interest there is in what Ajax is proposing. I take seriously your request for more opportunities to be heard on this issue. My staff welcomes your questions and I welcome your comments. I'm here this evening to listen to you. Before we get started, I want to talk to you a little bit about why we're holding another online meeting and hearing instead of an in-person event. I understand the decision to hold this hearing online may not satisfy everyone's request. At this point, though, there are still so many uncertainties around the spread of COVID. Numbers continue to rise, and we have just mandated masks for all in-person work, and we've even delayed the return for our in-office work due to the current status of the COVID Delta variant. As such, we could not, in good conscience, risk exposing you, the public, or our staff by holding an in-person indoor event. While I know this is not ideal, and some of you may still be frustrated by it, I hope that by extending the comment period and providing these multiple opportunities for you to meet with us and provide comments on the draft permit will help. I'm really pleased to hear that the community was able to arrange an outside gathering to participate in tonight's online information session and hearing. I understand that Eagle's Environmental Justice Public Advocate, Regina Strong, is attending your event tonight, and we're very happy that we can work with you to ensure anyone in attendance at that community meeting can provide a comment tonight if they wish to. As a decision maker for the proposed permit, I take every comment very seriously. All comments, whether they come to us at a public hearing, in an email, via US mail, on our public comment voice mailbox call-in number, or even on a Post-it note that you drop in the mail, we review all of those thoroughly prior to making a decision. I don't want to take up too much more of your time tonight, as I know many have questions and will want to speak. So know that I'll be listening in and you will see me during the hearing portion of the night. Thank you again for your attention. So Jen, at this point, I'm going to pass it back to you to get us going.
All right, thanks a lot, Mary Ann. I appreciate it. So a little bit about housekeeping before we get started. So you probably already figured this out, but just wanted to remind everybody that your lines are going to be muted during the meeting. We do have to physically unmute folks when we're talking in this format. So we are going to be recording this meeting. So the good thing about that is if you know of anybody who wasn't able to either attend your community event or to attend online and you want to make sure that they know what was going on, this meeting will be recorded. We'll post it on YouTube and it will be a closed caption for anybody who is either hearing impaired or who maybe has English as a second language. YouTube does allow us to translate those closed captions into other languages, which is pretty neat. The other meeting that Mary Ann talked about earlier, the one on August 3rd, is already posted. So if you haven't checked that out and you would like to, it's definitely available for you as well. Okay, so as promised, just want to go over again how to ask a question. And I will repeat myself, I promise, because I know sometimes it's like, okay, I'm calling in. What do I do again? So you can use that question and answer box at the bottom of your screen to go ahead and type in your question anytime. I know for me, when I'm listening to people talking, like, what are they talking about again? And it's easier for me to do that. But if it's easier for you to raise your hand using the hand icon at the bottom of the screen, when we get to the Q&A part, we'll try to unmute you so you can ask your question verbally. We do have some folks calling in on the phone. So if you are calling in and we get to that question and answer part, or this will apply to when it's time for the hearing, you can press #2 on your phone and it will actually raise your hand. So when we get to that, what I'll do is I will call out the last 4 digits of your phone number. So the important part about that is you have to know what they are. I know I do sometimes forget them or confuse them with my family members. So just make sure that you know what yours are. So if we end up calling on you, you'll be ready. So a couple of things before we get started. If you attended the other meeting, we kind of go into some of this a lot more in depth, but this is a really high level of what a permit application goes through once we get it from a company. When they decide to come in and they need to get an air permit, they have to go through this specific process. So right now we're in that public comment portion. And again, just to remind you, that public comment does not end until the 7th. So you definitely have plenty of time to enter a comment, and if you're not ready to do that tonight. So I want to talk a little bit about the public comment process. So this part of the process is especially important when it comes time for the decision maker, Marianne, that you heard from earlier, to make a final decision on the request from Ajax. So the comment period for this proposed permit has been open since July 1st. And like I said earlier, it will remain open until September 7th. So there's still time to make that comment, even if you're not ready to do so tonight. I know I've said that a few times, but I just want to make sure folks get that message in case people are nervous sometimes to even speak out loud on that case. So we have received quite a few comments already, and these comments range from very broad to very specific and kind of cover a variety of topics, such as a request for consideration of the environmental justice concerns related to the siting of the proposed asphalt plant. We've had some requests to increase the frequency of testing of certain pollutants. We've had requests for cumulative reviews of air toxics. We've also received requests for additional monitoring at the site, and we've also heard about some concerns about the emissions that would be from the proposed plant. So all of these comments, like Marianne said, will be reviewed and considered before she makes a decision. So as you heard earlier, this part of the process is really, really important. We're always really happy when we get a lot of comments like this. A lot of times we'll go through these public comment periods and we'll get maybe 1 or 2 comments, but when we really have communities that are interested, that really means a lot to us. So, at the end of this process, once Marianne gets a chance to look at all of the comments that we do receive, she'll make a decision on it. So once she makes that decision, she has 3 basic choices. Her first choice is to just issue the permit as it's written right now. Her second choice is to issue the permit, but with changes based on all these great comments that we've received. And then she does have another choice of denying that permit. So that can happen in certain cases as well. So as we move into some more of the specifics related to what Ajax is requesting, I'm going to have Amber talk to you about that proposed permit and the evaluation that she did to create the draft. So Amber, whenever you're ready, if you want to go ahead and turn your camera on and unmute your mic, you should be ready to go.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can. Sounds
All
great.
right. So as Jim mentioned, my name is Ambrosia Brown, or I also go by Amber. You'll hear it either way. And I've had the pleasure to speak with many of you already during this public comment period. But if you haven't reached out to me and we haven't talked, if you have any questions after this informational session and hearing, I hope you feel comfortable to reach out to me. So I was the lead permit engineer and one of multiple air quality staff here at EGLE who are involved in the review of Ajax air permit application. And the proposed project has a lot of specific requirements Ajax would have to follow if the permit was approved. I will talk about these in greater detail later, but there's some key areas that you may be interested in or you may want more details in. And as I said, if you want any more information, please reach out to me. These topics are emission limits. This is the amount of air emissions Ajax would be allowed to emit for that pollutant. Required control equipment. This is equipment that is necessary to reduce the amount of pollutants from the project. Testing requirements. The proposed draft permit has requirements for testing specific pollutants. Monitor and recording requirements. The proposed draft permit also requires Ajax to check things on a regular basis and keep records of this to prove compliance. So the air permit application Ajax submitted is for a hot mix asphalt plant. All hot mix asphalt plants generally have the same process. And I know anyone who has attended our last hearing has already heard this, but let's go over it again as a reminder and for anyone who wasn't here. So I will walk you through this process and then go into more specific detail about what Ajax is requesting. So in general, asphalt is made from aggregates, and that includes recycled asphalt pavement or RAP. And this was mixed with asphalt cement. The use of RAP not only keeps the materials from landfills, but reduces the emissions from some pollutants like volatile organic compounds or VOCs during the production. The asphalt cement is stored in heated tanks, which we also require to have pollution control equipment. This captures and prevents vapors from potential odors getting into the air. Those ingredients, the aggregate, including RAP and asphalt cement, are transferred to a dryer drum mixer. And this is done primarily through conveyors and front-end loaders. This finished asphalt product is then transferred to silos, and then from the silos to the trucks where it's hauled away. There are potential emissions from burning of fuels in the process. Natural gas or recycled used oil may be burned in the drum dryer to dry the aggregate. Natural gas would be used to keep the asphalt tanks warm. And in addition to the potential air emissions from fuel burning, there are some potential emissions from the material handling and storage, truck loading, and traffic. These type of emissions are called fugitive because they're not captured and sent to a stack. Captured emissions from the drum dryer and truck loading area are sent to air filtering systems, which trap more pollutants before it is released through a stack. Processes like the proposed asphalt plant must have an air permit prior to installation of the equipment. So I just briefly talked about what Ajax is proposing and what parts of the draft permit may be of interest to you. But before we get into the details of the proposed draft permit and the review of the project, I want to talk about why we require a permit in the first place. So what is a permit? An air permit is a set of conditions or rules which a company is required to follow to show that they will meet all the rules and regulations in place to protect public health. A company wanting to install something like an asphalt plant must have a permit before they can install and operate the equipment. A permit includes restrictions on how much and what kinds of pollutants can be emitted, what materials can be used, and how a process must operate, such as a requirement to install and operate specific equipment to reduce emissions, specific requirements for monitoring and recording activities. For example, Ajax would be required to limit how many tons of aggregate or stone are used, and they would also be required to test specific pollutants. Now, while reviewing the asphalt plant Ajax was proposing, we looked at several items. These included the level of emissions being requested and the capacity of the equipment they're proposing. We use this information to determine what rules and regulations would apply. Part of our review includes looking at pollutants which would be emitted and in what amounts. So when we look into these levels, we determine if they will meet health-based standards. To do this, I compared potential emissions of the pollutants with the health-based screening levels that toxicologists like Keisha, who you may hear from later, help develop. So our screening levels are designed to protect against public health problems like developing cancer or breathing problems. In this review, pollutants are looked at individually. But since people may be exposed to multiple pollutants at once, this can be looked as a limitation to the rules. However, asphalt fumes are looked at as a mixture, not a single pollutant. So the fumes were reviewed using a cumulative risk method designed to be protective against the risk of developing cancer. Based on the potential air impacts, the proposed emissions would not violate these health-based screening levels. So I also worked with Stephanie, who used high-tech computer simulation modeling to predict concentrations of what the pollutants would be in the surrounding areas. So we do use this term frequently when you hear modeling. That's what we're talking about. And it was performed for particulate matter and toxics for Ajax. The model must show what predicted impacts would meet. The model must show that the predicted impacts would meet the health-based screening for these pollutants. We also wanted to make sure that the equipment Ajax proposed to use to reduce emissions were appropriate and would be effective. Based on the review of these things, among others, we were able to create the draft air permit, which we're here to discuss and take comments on. Now, this is interesting. I'm going to talk a little bit about control devices. And controls devices reduce the potential emissions by capturing them. And in this case, on the left, you see a gray box, which is called a baghouse or a fabric filter. It's filled with hundreds of fabric tubes, kind of like socks, and they filter out small particulates. The small square box on the top of the photo is a knockout box or gravity collector, which removes larger particles. On the right is a counterflow drum. Since the year about 2000, we've only allowed this kind of drum to be installed in Michigan at new or rebuilt plants because the old style drum or a parallel flow drum created excessive odors and potential smoke. So along with the other control devices, the draft permit requires the control of when the asphalt is being put into the trucks. This is called load-out control, and you'll probably hear us use the term quite frequently. Additionally, emissions captured at the top of the silos are sent to a filtration system, and that also reduces the emissions from the plant. So now that we kind of know the system, we kind of know what we're talking about, here's a highlight of some of the contents of the proposed draft permit for Ajax. The proposed permit conditions have sections for different pieces of equipment. We call these emission units. These emission units include the drum dryer mixer and conveyors, the yard sources like stockpiles and on-side roads, the asphalt cement tanks, and the silos. And remembering that the silos include the load out where we're loading the trucks. The draft permit also includes several required pieces of emission control equipment. These are like the counterflow drum, which I just discussed, much better than the parallel. Air filtration system, like the baghouse, a load out control, and the vapor condensation and control system on the asphalt tanks. So these proposed conditions contain requirements to make sure Ajax would not exceed the level of emissions proposed. They're reviewed by myself and the rest of the permitting team. So these requirements include proper use, monitoring, and maintenance of the equipment, emission limits for specific pollutants, emission testing for specific pollutants, a plan to minimize dust from fugitive sources. And as a reminder, fugitive dust means emissions which are not captured and sent to a stack. There's also a requirement to have a monitoring plan for recycled used oil, although the company has said that they do not plan on using that fuel. So I'm going to now pass it back to Jen, and she'll open the floor for question and answer.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amber. Appreciate it. And I'm sorry about my slippery fingers on the slides there. That usually doesn't happen, but for some reason, my computer's being a little finicky with me tonight. So again, we've got our panelists here with us today. So panelists, if you guys want to go ahead and turn your cameras on, I would really appreciate that. I'm going to just advance the slide for a second, just to kind of go over how you can ask a question again if you need to. So we do already have some questions in the question and answer box, so thank you for that. So you can go ahead and type your questions in if you have them. Again, you can use that raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen, or if you are calling in, you can type #2 on your phone. All right, so let me introduce my panelists here. You just heard from Amber. And again, she is our permit engineer at the site. Dan, if you can give a little wave. Dan is our inspector for this area. And we've got Stephanie Heinspa. She is the modeler. So she's the person who Amber talked about uses the computer to kind of see where pollutants might be ending up on the site and outside of the site. We've got Keisha Williams. She is our toxicologist that's with us tonight, and Susan Kilmer, who works with our air monitoring unit. That would be the folks who use those kind of stationary monitors to look at outdoor air quality. All right, so let me get to some of these questions. All righty. And thanks everybody for doing that. I greatly appreciate it. I gotta just open up another box here a minute so I can be ready for all of you. All right. Okay, so, all right, this is going to be a good question for you, Amber, and you might not know this holistically, but in general, if you could respond to it. So the question says, is Ajax asking for anything different on their permit that is different from asphalt plants operating in the state at the present time? So do you know of anything different either that they're asking for or maybe that we're requiring that you could talk to?
In the state of Michigan, we do have specific requirements that other states do not have, pertaining to the no use of parallel flow is one of them that I mentioned. The use of a bag house is pretty standard for control, regardless of the state. The use of loadout is something that we in Michigan specifically require, and we have seen a lot of improvements when it comes to issues in the area with complaints with existing plants when we started requiring loadout control.
Can you talk again about, just mention again what loadout is? If you don't.
Yeah. Loadout control is where you have the silo. We used to have imagery of this. I don't know if we do. We have the silo, and then the truck drives up under and dumps asphalt down. And before it would be just open and you'd get some fumes, coming off that. In Michigan, we require loadout control, which, we enclose that area and we have ventilation that then pulls that those fumes out and sends it to a filtration system. And that is something that in the state of Michigan, we require for all new and large modifications at an asphalt plant.
Yep, thank you for that.
So yeah,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. If you have more to add, go ahead. I apologize.
No, it's okay. So like they're requesting basically the normal things you see. I think the only one of the more unique items is rather than just requiring watering of the roads to keep down the dust, they have requested to also be able to use calcium chloride. This is a coating that can be used instead, and it would really cut down on runoff. So, and on the water side, there's an advantage of using less water and having less runoff there.
Okay, thank you for that. The next question is going to go to Dan. So Dan, if you can ready your unmute button. And I'm not sure if you know the answer to this question. So if you don't, we can definitely get back to this person. But this question is asking about an asphalt plant on Coldwater Road, just east of Dort. So they were wondering if you know anything about this other asphalt plant, if you can just talk a little bit about maybe its compliance status and if you know anything. And again, I'm not sure your familiarity with this one off the top of your head, but kind of what their emissions, allowed emissions are maybe compared to what this Ajax facility is proposing, if that makes sense. And let me know if my question isn't making sense to you.
No, it is a good question, Jen. Decades ago, there was an asphalt plant at the site, a hot mix asphalt plant. However, there has not been a hot mix asphalt plant at that site for decades, not since 1995 or before. It appears to be an equipment storage site or a staging area. There does not appear to be a hot mix asphalt plant there.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
Thanks.
Yeah, not a problem. So this is a great question. So the question is, what alternative locations did Ajax consider when looking at where to build this plant? So this is a great question in a lot of ways. And the best way sort of to answer that is that's not something that they share with us. Unfortunately, we don't get involved in the sites that they think that a company might want to put a facility in on. It's not something that they have to ask EGLE about. That really starts at the municipal level. So it starts with zoning decisions, what is zoned for where, what can be allowed in certain locations. So typically, and this is not always the case, we've seen relatively recently that there's been a couple occasions where it hasn't happened in this order. But typically what happens is a company who wants to install either new or different equipment at a site has to have conversations with the local municipality. They have to get approval to have an industrial process there. Sometimes they have to get approval to have a specific industrial process there and at a specific spot on the site. Once they establish that, and again, I said typically, because like I said, sometimes they do this in reverse order, but typically that's what will happen. And then they'll apply for their permit with us and with water or whoever else they need to get permits with. So that is a really great question. And I think it goes a lot to, when we get questions on why would Eagle allow this facility here? It really is a great question because unfortunately for us, we don't get to decide that usually. So the ways that we can sometimes influence that go to the next question that you asked, which I think is another really good question. And Steph, I'm going to pull you in on this one. But it says, how far can the air pollution from this plant travel? So this is why we really use that air modeling when it's a new proposed facility to try to show us worst case scenarios of where things can go. So Stephanie, if you don't mind kind of talking a little bit about the process that you go through to look at that, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem at all. I'm going to go ahead and give a little synopsis, I guess, of what I do. That I'm going to actually share a couple slides to maybe help it be more understandable. Basically, what I have to do for my portion of the air permit is basically build the facility in a computer program. I include any buildings at the facility, any emission points for this particular project. There was a stack. There were piles that were taken into consideration. There were roadways that were taken into consideration. And like I said, build it in a computer. And then from there, I add meteorology to it. So when the meteorology is applied to this and you have the emission points of
Hey, Steph, I don't want to
Yes.
interrupt you, but can you just specify what you mean by meteorology? So are you talking weather, wind, that kind of stuff? What are you talking
Meteorology, what we looked at for this particular facility is one full year MET set. The whole MET set takes into consideration temperatures, dew points, wind speeds at the surface and at upper levels. So that's all applied into the model. So what we want to do is, okay, these emissions are coming out of the stack or the piles, and when the weather, the wind speeds, the temperatures, when it's applied to that, when the weather conditions are happening over that year time frame, where is the pollution going as it's coming out of this facility? Where is it traveling? How far does it go? And really the important thing for us is we want to find out what that maximum impact is. Because if we can show that overall maximum impact is meeting the state and federal standards that are set in place, then it's deemed passing modeling. And kind of with that, I'm gonna, like I said, do you mind if I share my slide, Jennifer? Okay. If I can, you can bear with me for 1 second here so I can try to share a slide. Okay, can you guys see what kind of looks like a map with a whole lot of little yellow dots on it? Pretty much with what this is right here is a map of the area of the facility. And the center portion of this map I'm showing you is the facility itself. There are no yellow dots in that area. Basically, all these yellow dots represent what we call in the modeling world receptors. And a receptor is pretty much a pseudo monitor. So what we want is when we apply the meteorology to this facility, what is the max impact at every single one of these dots in this receptor grid? And you can see from I'm kind of blew up a small portion of it. Closer into the facility, we do have a more dense grid. Typically, the impacts do happen closer to the facility. And that was the case for all the pollutants that were modeled for Ajax. The pollutants, the max impact was typically just to kind of the north and a little bit to the east of the facility, depending on what averaging time was looked at. There are different averaging times for different pollutants, meaning one can be what's the maximum 1 hour impact. Another can be what is the annual average over a full year. So just kind of depending on if it was a short term or long term, because meteorology is different in a short term compared to long term. But basically, we figured out what is the maximum impact at this location, and then you can see as you go further from the facility, the receptor grid does get a little bit less dense. But I'm gonna go ahead and show you one more slide I pulled together today, just to kind of give you a better idea. This map is zoomed out more, and it's a map of the area. There you can see under the EE of Genesee, that's kind of the facility that was closer in before. And you can see a little bit, not as clear, but the yellow dots too. And that kind of turquoise bluish square around there, that is how far my model grid went out. And I did some lines here just to kind of give it a little estimate. I looked at or determined impacts from roughly the center of the facility going northeast, south, and west, roughly 6.5 miles. And it goes out to about 9 miles if you go kind of diagonal to the corners of my model grid. So I did look at a large area, you know, almost 12, 13 miles if you go straight north and south or east to west across the area. And again, the maximum impacts were a little bit closer into the facility where we really do have those kind of pseudo monitors really close in. And it did show that impacts were below the necessary criteria for the different pollutants evaluated.
That was a really good explanation. Thanks a lot for that, Stephanie. I appreciate you doing that. Now I'm going to attempt to share my screen back.
Yeah, okay.
Here.
Okay.
We'll see if we'll.
I wasn't sure if I needed to do something.
No, you're totally fine.
Okay. All right.
All right. Okay, there we go. So we got another really good question. And I'm going to take this one too. So the question was, what does EGLE require the company, Ajax in this case, obviously, to do to engage with the local community? So that is a really great question. And unfortunately, at this point, we don't have any rules or regulations or laws that require a company to engage with the public with a permit application like this. We always strongly encourage companies many times to engage with communities early in the process, very early in the process, the earlier the better. But unfortunately, at this point, we don't have any requirements that would require somebody to do that. So for instance, we don't have anything that says if you would like to have a permit here, or you would like us to grant an air permit or a water permit or whatever the permit might be, you must do these specific things in a community so that the community is aware of what you would like to do. So take that as it is. That is basically where we are with that right now. Next question is going to be for you, Susan. So if you can get ready for this, and you might need to pass it back to Amber, but I'm going to start with you on this one. So this question goes to the air monitoring stations used to look at the impacts of the worst case scenario pollution from the plant. So I know there was some comments and stuff that had come in previously. So if you can kind of talk a little bit about what stations they were and where they were, that would be really appreciated. And then if you need to pass it back to Amber for some specific information on what the review included, because the second part of that question is, are we looking at how much background pollution is already there based on those monitoring locations? And then does it consider or differentiate between pollution during the day and at night?
Sure. So we do have a Flint monitoring station that is just 2 miles south of this proposed location. And at that station, we monitor ozone and fine particulate matter, or PM 2.5. We also have some MET parameters there, like wind speed, wind direction. And that station monitors air pollution 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, year round. I think part of the question also might go to Stephanie in terms of which monitoring sites were used. maybe in the modeling. I know that we don't have every parameter at the Flint site, and depending on the evaluation that's done or the modeling, sometimes we have to use data from other locations. So we do have some monitors in Lansing, also Grand Rapids, and as Jennifer mentioned, we have about 40 different stations around the state that measure different things. So I think that's kind of the air monitoring part.
Did you have anything to add to that, Stephanie, based on what Susan said?
Like Susan said, we did use the Flint monitor for PM 2.5 in our analysis because that monitor does collect PM 2.5. And like she said, it is about 2 miles just south of the facility. The other pollutants that we modeled, NO2, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and then PM 2.5, fine particulate, 10 microns or smaller, there weren't any monitors right there. So the ones in the most similar, I guess, area, we looked at a couple of things I looked at. I looked at the Lansing NO2 background concentration. That's the one we used in our original analysis, the Lansing monitor, and then the Grand Rapids monitor for PM10 and for SO2. You know, today I did go and kind of reevaluate that and look at our background monitors, and even looking at our more urban monitors, like our Allen Park monitor, for instance, or there's a roadway monitor for nitrogen dioxide down in the southeastern portion of the state. Even adding those background concentrations, which would definitely be less conservative, even adding those background concentrations to the model impacts for this particular facility, it still showed that it was the pollutants were still meeting the standard. I was just kind of curious out of my own site, because like I said, those are the closest or most representative monitors we can come up with, but even kind of using the less conservative ones, it seemed like modeling would still pass, looking at the southeast monitors.
So Stephanie, thank you for the explanation on that. I'm still getting some questions in the question box that there's still concerns about, you know, when we're talking about looking at outdoor air quality and we're looking at ambient air for certain pollutants like that. Is it typical for us to use monitors that are that distance away from a proposed facility? Or that, I think that's the concern, that this seems like they're very far away. And is that a normal thing that we do? Does it, you know, does it make sense that we would use something far away just because we don't have a monitor by there? Is there another methodology that it could have possibly be used? If you can just kind of speak to that a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, I will say, first of all, that no, it's not uncommon for us to have to use monitor background data from a facility that is that far away. We'll kind of evaluate most of the monitors and a little bit of it's a judgment call, I guess, on our part, but we'll deem what we feel is most representative of the area, trying to take to be conservative with our assumptions as well. And I'm not sure I answered all that, to be honest. I'm sorry. I kind of lost track of what you had said, Jennifer.
I think it's a hard one. It's just that, you know,
it is.
I think when we hear those concerns and we've gotten comments on those kinds of things, and, you know, when you're looking at, here's the site in Genesee Township, and then we're looking at Grand Rapids. Well, I live by Grand Rapids, so I know how far away it is. So I understand the concerns there. So
Absolutely.
you know, I did want you to just kind of address, like, what is the normal process that we go through when we're doing this? Because the computer model is very technologically savvy. It takes the information that you put in and it does its magic. That's what I call it, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But it has been proven to be quite accurate when we use that information to, you know, then kind of verify pollutants. So it's an interesting concept. So I totally understand the question on that one. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And there is one thing, I'm sorry, where I lost my train of thought that I wanted to add with this. When we're looking at the background we want to add to the model as well, when we're doing our national ambient air quality analysis for the criteria pollutants, that's when it's a cumulative analysis. So we need to look at the impact of the facility. We need to look at the impact of additional sources, and then we need to look at the background concentrations for the different criteria pollutants. And that whole background, that's where we looked at the background monitors for that background level. So in some ways, to be honest, it's not, to have a monitor right next to the facility might deem it maybe double counting if you add additional sources to the model and you add a background or monitor that's right there picking up all those other facilities in an area, because you're going to get emissions from both ways, from the monitor potentially and from the adding them to the model itself. So really too, with the monitors, we're not looking at an overall max impact. We want to know what the background levels are in the general area.
Okay.
I don't know if that
Thank you.
helps.
No, I think it
That's
did.
kind
A
of
little
how
bit.
it's added into it.
A little bit. It's, again.
I know it is very confusing, and absolutely I understand that question. I really do.
Well, there is one more question that I'm going to pass to you, and then I'm going to go to Amber with the next one. So just because we're talking with you, and I think that this is kind of important, and it was interesting too, and it asks, is the meteorological data based on a typical asphalt season, or are you looking at a 12-month period? Because typically asphalt, that's a great question. You know, we're running early spring to late fall, not necessarily in the winter time. In the winter time, sometimes we'll see you know, higher levels of maybe particulates, where in the summer we get ozone, so those kinds of things. So I don't know if that plays in at all, but if you could respond to that.
The meteorology data we use is data gathered from the National Weather Service. So it's data collected from the government. We use the Flint Airport data, which is, I think it's maybe roughly 8-9 miles south of the facility. I think so. We used a full 1 year from January 1st. And I think because when this came in, the most recent meteorology data we had was actually the year 2019. So we put into the model from January 1st of 2019 to December 31st of 2019. So because that's one thing, and that is a good question, because we do really want to make sure we can take into consideration all seasons, not just certain ones, because yeah, the weather's a lot different in every single season of the year. So we want to make sure that the worst meteorology conditions can be applied over a year time frame to the impacts.
Well, thank you for responding to that. I
No
do
problem.
appreciate it. I learn stuff every time we do these, and I've worked in air quality for a long time, so I appreciate it. Okay, Amber, as promised, this one's going to come to you, and this is looking at that indoor truck loading. So more about that load out control. And the question is, I know having indoor truck loading will cut back on pollutants. Will Ajax be doing just indoor truck loading, or will they have some open air loading as well? And so that's part one. So if you want to answer that one first, and then we'll get to kind of part two of this question.
Okay, so, you know, as part of that process, you know, the asphalt they make will be going into the silos before that they go into the trucks. And all of the silos are going to be required to be within that load out controlled area. I don't know if I'd call it necessarily indoor, because, you know, they're kind of walls that don't necessarily go all the way down to the ground. But we still use the word, you know, term enclosed, but that's, the truck loading will be in an enclosed area.
So this is nitty gritty, but is there a chute, Amber, that goes to the top of the truck? Do you know, is that part of the proposal, or is it just like that space minimized in the loadout area? Does that make sense?
I think it openly drops. It's
Okay.
not like it goes through a chute, if that's what you're asking.
But there's active fans that pull that through the thing.
Yeah,
Maybe Dan might be able to speak to that.
we don't have,
He's seen
don't
a
have
lot
the
of
imagery,
them.
but like part, let me do the towards the camera. So have top of the silo, and then like partial walls that go down beyond the top of the truck. And then so when it's dropping, wind can't, because there's the walls around it, won't like blow it away. And then there'll be a suction pulling that out. And now I'm a hand person.
Yes, the visualization is definitely helpful, I think. And we do have a diagram that we can show later if we need to as well. But so the second part of this question is talking about something that you had brought up earlier as far as fugitive dust control, and specifically controlling the dust on the roadways in the plant. So the fact that it says the fact that Ajax looks to spray calcium chloride around their facility instead of water should be alarming, that they aren't able to use, that they shouldn't be able to use these toxic chemicals. So I know we're not the water division, and typically this comes up more in conversations with that, but I don't know if you can talk a little bit about just how a fugitive dust plan is written, and would that kind of thing be included in that? Would alternatives be necessarily included in that, and kind of how that works?
Well, the default way is using water generally. And Ajax had requested to be able to use the calcium chloride. And, it sounded more of a concern, more like a statement that maybe you want to make as a comment rather than a question. So please, say that in the next portion. Do you agree, Jen?
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, I know some folks are asking questions, and then they're also kind of commenting on those questions. So I was just going to also remind folks, so thank you for that, Amber, that when the comments, if you want to, and you don't obviously have to, I mean, it is important to get for us to have that context when you're asking a question. But if you want to submit a lot of that in the comment portion, when we get to that at 7, that's also wonderful. So I know that seems repetitive, but it is really helpful for us if you do that too. So a couple other things. So Keisha, I think I'm going to put this one to you, and I don't know that you can answer it thoroughly, but I think that you're going to probably be the best person to kind of address this, and maybe how we work with DHHS on some things, but potentially probably not this one, but I just thought you might be the best person to address this. And if you're not, just let me know. But the question is, does EGLE look at public health data, especially in permitting decisions like this? Many residents in the area around the proposed plant location have asthma. Adding more air pollution is very concerning. So you talk a little bit about that. And I know we don't necessarily do that as part of our review, but I think you have probably the most experience with looking at that stuff.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And you're right, Jen, we don't do that as a part of the review, but we do look at health data in a given area, knowing that it's an important consideration, and it's something that we want to stay on top of and be aware of. At the same time, it's helpful to know that within the health-based screening levels or the health-based national standards, they do take into account sensitive groups, like people who have asthma, like children, like the elderly. And so with those, they're still factoring in those sensitive populations. But with health data, that's not within our review outside of those health-based screening levels.
Thank you for that. That's kind of what I thought you were going to have to say, but I get surprised at things for sure. Okay, so there's a question about increased traffic in the area. So traffic, again, is one of those things that we don't have a purview over when it comes to looking at a proposed application like this. But when Amber was talking about that proposed permit, one of the things that she mentioned was the fugitive dust plan, making sure that the excess dust on the site, if this permit does get approved in some way, shape, or form, is minimized to the extent possible. When it comes to dust and things like that that are associated with air quality, if there is any concerns with that, or if people would start experiencing what we call track out, which is basically trucks bringing debris from a site onto the road, or excess dust that they're seeing coming off the site, then that's when you would give Dan a call and let him know, and he would definitely be coming out and responding to that complaint. So even though we don't deal with increased traffic and kind of mitigating that, that's something that the township would likely be dealing with, depending on who owns those roadways. But it is a really great question, so I appreciate you bringing that up. We're getting a lot of questions about cumulative impacts. In fact, like 4 different ones. People asking in different ways, shapes, or forms of, did we do a cumulative impact look at things? I know Amber talked about this a little bit, but I'm going to have you talk about it a little bit more, Keisha. So, have we done that? Shouldn't we be doing that? Is there a way to measure all the different pollutants all at once? That kind of thing. So I'm kind of lumping a lot of those questions together because I think it lends itself to that same concept. Are we looking at pollutants holistically? Are we looking at them as, like Amber had said earlier, we know that people are exposed to a mixture of pollutants. It's not one thing at a time. That doesn't make sense. So if you could talk a little bit more about how the asphalt fumes were sort of those screening levels were developed, or kind of what you look at? Or, I mean, you obviously have way more experience. I don't know why I'm telling you what you should be talking about in that case, but if you could address that a little bit, I think that'd be really appreciated for folks.
Thanks for that. And it is a really important question. I completely understand why multiple people have the same concern. It's a really important aspect of the review. So there are maybe 2 or 3 ways that we look at it. The first 1 or 2 ways are related to the permit review. One, as Amber described, is that with this specific permit review with asphalt fumes, the way that we look at it and the way that we evaluate it is specifically for the pollutants that are carcinogens within asphalt fumes, and looking at those emissions and making sure that there's not an elevated risk of developing cancer because those are being emitted. And there wasn't shown to be an elevated risk. Those emissions are relatively low. We look at those again as a mixture. Another way that we do it is with the monitoring data. And so with the monitoring data, it's not just collecting data from one facility, just from traffic, just from one source. The monitors are collecting information from the area in general. And so that gives us more of a combined or an aggregated look at individual pollutants. And those are ways that we do it within the review. Outside of that, we also have other tools and assessments sometimes available to us. And one is the National Air Toxics Assessment. And just in general, this looks at both cancer or pollutants that can cause cancer, as well as pollutants that don't cause cancer, a certain number of them, and it looks at those. And similar to the virtual kind of monitors that the modeling unit does and that Stephanie talked about, this uses emissions data from the different sources in the area, from traffic, even considering things like trees and background sources. And it looks at all of those, and it takes a snapshot every once in a while over like 3 or 4 years. It'll look at that data from a given year, and it'll combine a number of those pollutants, and it'll give us an idea of the combination of those pollutants, how they might affect someone's health. And we do have that for this area. We have that information. And with that, we can start to consider some of those questions about cumulative risk when looking at multiple pollutants. And when we do that, when we look at the National Air Toxics Assessment and the results for this area, we see that for non-cancer pollutants, it's not at the level where we would consider it a health concern because of the pollutants that are being looked at. And not everything is being examined, but the ones that are, it's not reaching the level of a health concern. And then we also, again, look at pollutants that can cause cancer, and we do the same analysis. And this area is about the same, a little bit lower than national average, and again, about the same, a little bit lower than the state average.
Thank you for that. I know that was a question that a lot of folks had, so I greatly appreciate that. I saw that we're getting close to 7. We do have one more really good question, and this one's going to go for you, Susan. So I just want to let folks know after Susan answers this question, this is where we're going to get into the actual hearing portion. So remember that the hearing portion is where your comments will go on the record, and we won't be responding like we are now. So just kind of remind folks how that's going to work. And I'll probably reiterate myself again, just to let you know. All right, so Susan, this is a great question about the monitors. So when we talk about the monitoring stations, and you said there's, about 40 plus monitoring stations around the state, 100 different kind of stations, we call them, where they monitor or measure different things. And if anybody's interested in this, we actually have a really kind of cool interactive map that shows you where they all are based on where you live. You can type your address in, and it will show you the closest one and what it measures. So it's kind of neat. If anybody wants to know more about that, I'm happy to walk you through it at some point. But this question says that you say that air pollutants will be monitored 2 miles away. There's residents that are living a lot closer than that. So shouldn't we be measuring those pollutants and monitoring them at public parks, maybe the places that are directly adjacent or downwind to the facilities? So I thought maybe you could answered that question a little bit. Stephanie talked about it in that we're looking at this kind of outdoor sort of background measurements, but maybe you can talk a little bit about how we choose locations and things like that, and what we try to get monitored and measured in some of those locations, specifically the ones around where Ajax is proposing to build.
Sure. So we receive funding from the EPA to do ambient air monitoring throughout the state. And again, ambient air monitoring is measuring air pollution out where people live. So it's not specifically related to an industrial source. And the funding that we get from EPA is for this network. And we have to follow a lot of really specific requirements. A lot of the requirements are based on population. So we look at the population areas of the state, and there are requirements for us to measure certain types of parameters in different populated areas. So for example, a city of 1 million may have to have like 2 ozone monitors, 2 fine particulate matter samplers, something for nitrogen dioxide, maybe a sulfur dioxide. So the regulations are pretty prescriptive on what we need to monitor and where. And again, a lot of times that's based on population. Sometimes it's based on other criterias like emissions from certain source types or near roadways. So that's kind of the first cut of how we decide what to monitor where, is we have to look at those federal regulations and see what's required. So that's kind of the first thing we do, make sure we're meeting the requirements. Where we can, we try to add additional monitoring, especially in populated areas. If maybe only 2 ozone monitors are required, if we're able to, sometimes we add a third, or just kind of depends what the needs are and what the current monitors are showing. If there's an area that's measuring higher pollution of something, that may cause us to measure something else that's related. When we pick the specific locations, so Flint, for example, has to have an ozone monitor and a PM 2.5 monitor. When we go to pick those kind of specific sites, we actually do look at places like parks, schools, areas that are kind of near neighborhoods. So we take into account those kind of things. A lot of our monitoring sites are actually located at schools. We have some that are at maybe township halls or fire stations, things like that. Kind of the goal is to measure pollution where people live, work, and play.
So thank you for that, Suzanne. I appreciate that. I know it always kind of, when you look at the map, it seems a little arbitrary, but there is definitely a method to it. And I'm going to ask you a follow-up question that was not in the question box, but
Sure.
The follow-up question would be, when we look at our network, which is what we call all the monitors combined,
Right.
Do we typically exceed what the requirements are? I know you talked about things that we have to do, and kind of some things that we add in. So are we typically, because I know we review this network, this group of monitors throughout the state every year and make recommendations, but are we typically kind of having more things than we're normally required to do, or are we kind of just on the line? Where we typically fall out on that?
Sure, that's a great question. So we definitely meet all the federal requirements of the number and types of monitors and the locations, but we're definitely doing more than what's required. When you look at that map that you mentioned on our website, it's a pretty neat GIS-based map. And you can zoom in and look at different areas and click on the actual stations and see what's measured there. But I would say a big majority of our monitors are located in Southeast Michigan. And that's largely because that's a high population area. There's more industry, there's more highways. And so especially in areas like Southeast Michigan, we exceed what's the minimum required, but even statewide. We always try to do as much as we can with what we have. And if we had more funding and such, we would do more if we could. but we're limited by funding and equipment and employees and that kind of thing. But we're definitely trying to do as much as we can for the public and to post our data in real time on our website so people can see what the air quality is where they live and work. So
it's a good point. And I know we're running out of time, and I said we were going to start at 7, but I did, just to reiterate, this is not definitely something that is used for a specific facility. It's exactly what you said, used to look at the air quality where people, are walking around and things like that. One thing before we start the public hearing, I just want to mention, based on what Susan said, is the air monitoring network that she talked about is up. We put it out for comment every year. So, and that is in July. Am I lying about that?
We actually post it in May.
In May, sorry, I'm sorry about that.
Yep, it runs for 30 days. So it's usually kind of early mid-May through early mid-June, and we have to finalize it by July 1st.
Okay, that's where that date came in. So no, we do, because we're talking about public comment tonight, and we do get comments on that open network. We would like more monitoring here, or we should be monitoring this, and we can't always accommodate that when the comments come in, but it's definitely, again, something that Susan and her staff look at very thoroughly. We definitely look at, could we accommodate that? Is there some moving around that we can do? So there are times when comments on that network, when it opens up in May, do lead to changes in the network for the next year. So just to plant the seed on that, very, important thing as well. So, all right. Thank you, panelists. Appreciate you answering all the questions that you did tonight. Great questions, by the way. Again, sometimes we don't get a lot of great questions. And so I always appreciate when folks have a lot of good questions. So you guys can go ahead and turn your cameras off if you want to. I'm going to ask Marianne to turn hers on while we go ahead and move over to the hearing portion of the night. So that being said, reminding folks again, I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can submit your comment into the comment box using that question and answer box. If you would rather submit a written comment tonight, completely acceptable. If you want to speak your comment out loud, again, you're going to just use that hand icon at the bottom of your screen, or we do have some folks that are calling in. So you're going to just press #2 on your phone, and that should raise your hand. It should raise your hand for you to do that. So that being said, it does try to raise hands in the order that they're received, but doesn't always work. So I'm just going to put that out there too. Okay. All right. So if for some reason, if you're at the community meeting, and I'm just putting this out there, and I can bring this slide back up again too later, if for some reason you all outside are having any issues connecting with us to be able to give a comment, we did practice it earlier, so I'm hoping that it will work just fine. But I wanted to just go ahead and put the phone number and the code up on the screen for a brief minute. I know you can tell that I'm dilly-dallying right now a little bit on that, just to see if folks want to utilize that or jot it down really quick, just so that you have it in case you need it. So, all right. Now we're going to shift over to the public hearing portion. So remember, this part of the evening is the part where we will not be responding to your questions. So what I want to do is just read the opening statement. So that's a specific statement that we have to read to technically open up the comment period. And then once that happens, then I'll start calling names, just to let you guys know. And I apologize that the opening statement is a little bit dry, just giving you some forewarning. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the public hearing portion of the evening. My name is Jennifer Dixon, and I realize I did not introduce myself yet, so I apologize for that. But now you know who I am, and I'm with the Environmental Support Division of the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, or EGLE. And I will be the hearing officer tonight. Marianne Dolahanty, Division Director for the Air Quality Division, is the decision maker for this permit application and will be listening in on the hearing tonight. This hearing is in regard to the draft air permit to install for the proposed installation of a new asphalt manufacturing plant for Ajax Materials Company, hereinafter Ajax, and their request to locate in Genesee Township, Michigan. I'm going to go over some background information before we start the hearing comments. The Air Quality Division is responsible for regulating sources of air pollutants to minimize adverse impacts on public health and the environment. The law governing those responsibilities is Part 55 of the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act. The purpose of tonight's hearing is to give anyone interested in the proposed air permit an opportunity to provide information the department may use in deciding whether to approve the permit to install or if there are additional issues to consider. Please note the proposed air permit is still a draft permit. This does not mean the department has already made a decision. Instead, it does reflect an initial technical review of the proposal that Ajax has submitted. We hope having these details of the draft permit available to you will help you in providing comments. Everything in the draft permit remains open for comment and further consideration by the department, including whether the permit will be granted at all. Please recognize the department can only use the information you provide if it relates to the criteria we must use in making a decision. For example, concerns related to local zoning, truck traffic, and noise are not within the department's authority. Some of you may want to simply express your support or opposition to the proposed projects. We are happy to make note of your decision, but please understand the department is by law not allowed to base our decision on whether or not there is widespread support or opposition to the proposed permit. This hearing is being recorded and your comments will be part of the information the department will use to make its decision on the proposed air permit. The public comment period for the proposed permit began on July 1st, 2021 and will end at midnight on September 7, 2021. Additional information and comments may be submitted through that time. After the close of the comment period, the decision maker will review all comments received before making a final decision. The decision maker may deny the permit, approve it as drafted, or approve it with amendments. If approved, the decision must specify which provisions of the draft permit, if any, have been changed in the final permit and the reasons for the change. In all three scenarios, approval with changes, or denial, all interested parties, including everyone who was on the original mailing list, anyone who provided comments during the public comment period, and anyone who attended the public meetings or hearings will be directly notified of the decision. This notification will include a letter from the decision maker regarding the decision and, if applicable, the approved permit. The decision will also be posted on our webpage and sent out through our EGLE electronic notification system. This is not your only opportunity to submit a comment. You may submit a comment via voicemail, email, or US mail at any time before September 7 at midnight. You can also drop comments off at the St. Francis Prayer Center, which I will talk about that a little bit later. I will provide specific comments or specific information on how to supply these comments later on in the evening. If you would like to make a comment tonight, there are two ways to do so. You may do so in writing by typing the word comment into the question box and then writing your comment. I will read aloud all comments you submit via the question box unless you state do not read. Your comment will still be part of the permanent record even if I do not read it out loud. If you would like to make a verbal comment, you may raise your hand and I will unmute your line so you can speak. We will limit your comment time to 3 minutes. If you are speaking, I will try to let you know when you have about 30 seconds left, and I will do my best to address commenters in the order your hands were raised. But please bear with us as the technology does have challenges for doing that. Please recognize department staff are here tonight to provide a fair opportunity for you to express your views on their proposed air permit and to listen to those comments. Thank you so much for your attention. I will now begin calling the names of folks who have indicated they would like to make a comment. All right, I'm just going to go back to that phone number just in case anybody else needs it. I just want folks to be able to use that if they would like to. Okay, all right, I have Mike Buza and I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, Mike, so that you can speak your comment. You should be able to unmute yourself now, so go ahead and try it whenever you're ready.
Can you hear me now?
We sure can. Go right ahead.
Thank you. I know I've heard that there needs to be some cumulative pollution provided by some of the other facilities in the area, and there's 3 other facilities in the immediate area that need to be considered. One of them I'm fairly familiar with is RJ Torching. They have received some EPA violations in the last 3 years. One of them has been open air burning, and Quite frankly, I'm surprised they have not received more violations on open air burning, because they do that quite a bit. It's a recycling center, RJ Torching, and I've been there to turn in recycling material, and I've seen them with open air burning a number of times. Also, I want to comment that all the other facilities, the other two facilities in the area, have also received EPA violations. Now, there has not been any in the last year, but Eagle has been doing different inspections than they usually have with the COVID. I spoke to Krister Etheridge from Eagle about this, and they are not doing the surprise inspections because of COVID. And I understand and appreciate that. We want to keep everybody healthy. But in the same vein, we need to keep all the residents healthy. And I suggest that that this permit be done until proper inspections can be done on all the facilities in the area to see that they are following their permits, their permits, so that we know what's going on. Otherwise, we do not know what's going on, since there has not been proper inspection since the COVID. Since this COVID epidemic has occurred. And I think after we get back to the usual inspections a year after that to find out what's going on in the area as far as pollutants being released in the air, then we can get back to looking at this permit. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Mike. Really appreciate your comment. I don't see any other hands raised right now. Allie, I don't know if you guys have folks there that would like to give a comment or not, but I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to do so if you do. So if you want to raise your hand, or I can unmute you and make sure that you guys don't. Just want to check my list and make sure that I don't have any other folks with hands raised. Ellie, I see that you unmuted. Do you guys have some folks that want to provide comment there?
Yep, we do.
Okay, so can you just give me a little update on, do you have a line of people? How many people, just so that I can make sure that we're getting names, et cetera, on the record?
Sure. We have a couple of different people. We have about 6 different people. So if you want to do one person at a time and then go back,
that would be lovely.
Okay.
Oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but how about we'll do 3, and then let me check to see if we have anybody online that has raised their hand. So if you can have 3, I know you're kind of there, so if you wouldn't mind just reminding folks to say their names, and if they have any affiliation that they would like to notice, they can do that as well. And will they be able to hear me too? So if I give them the 3-minute warning, they'll kind of know, or the 2-minute, 30-second warning, they'll know, they'll be able to hear that.
Yep,
Okay.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Oh, that sounds great. I really appreciate that. Okay, well, if you want to have the first person go right ahead and say their name and their affiliation and their comment, that would be awesome.
Hi, my name is Bishop Commissioner Bernadelle L. Jefferson. I'm a pastor and am a resident of Mount Morris Township, on the corner from where you are intending to put a plant.
We got you back there, Allie. Go ahead. Sorry. I'm sorry. We just lost you for a second, but go right ahead with your comment. I'll make sure to give you some extra time too.
Thank you. Environmental injustice. It has encroached upon our health. I know that this plant will be in Mount Morris Township or Genesee Township, but right across the street is Flint, Michigan, where it's a residential community where there are children. And if you look around, there are children all around today. There are elderly. We already have been burdened with a wood burning plant. We already have been burdened with a paint plant. And you don't have to be here in the midnight hour when you're trying to breathe and when you're trying to, oh, you can't open up your windows. I live on Dort Highway, and my daughter, come here, baby. That's right.
Ellie, I think we might have lost you guys again. You might need to get closer to the.
Okay.
Oh, no,
Okay.
that's okay. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you get to do your whole comment.
This is my daughter, which has an 8-month-old baby. They just got out of the hospital for 2 weeks with breathing problems. And we don't need anything else to hamper her breathing problem. She's 8 months old. What kind of life expectancy can we anticipate with a asphalt plant, with a wood burning plant, and with a paint plant? Because we are in a low income community, do it mean we don't have any rights? Do it mean we don't have any privileges? Do it mean we don't have any entitlement? We deserve to breathe fresh, clean, healthy air. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment. I really appreciate it. Ellie, if you want to have the next person go ahead whenever they're ready.
Testing.
We hear you. Thank you. Just make sure to say your name before you start with your comment, please.
Yes, my name is July Copeland. I am a tenant resident here at River Park Apartments. I've been here 8 years. My concerns are with asphalt. I'm concerned about the health for our elders.
Come sit in the chair. Don't use the microphone. Just talk.
I just want our community to be with a safe environment, healthy environment. And I also would like for our community to know more. That's what's going on, because we was informed at the last minute. Because some of us don't know what's really going on, what's going on 1,000 feet from our apartments. And also the community that's down by Carpenter Road School. There's a school down there also concerning with the elders and children, because they walk to the store and everything. So I would just basically, my concerns is about our health and safety.
Thank you so much for your comment. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you and have a good day.
Thank you. Ellie, do you have one more person that is ready to give their comment now?
Yep, we've got one more. She's making her way.
Okay, that sounds great.
We'll be able to hear you if you just sit and talk. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hello. Just please make sure you say your name before you get started on your comment.
Okay. My name is Joanne Tate, and I'm a resident out here at River Park Apartment. I just wonder why we wasn't aware of what y'all was finna put out here. Why we wasn't notified.
So Joy, just to remind you, we can't respond to your comments during this part, but if you have anything else that you'd like to add, please feel free to do so.
No, that was it.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. Ellie, just to let you know too, I don't have anybody else here that has their hand raised right now. So if you'd like to have somebody else take a turn, that would be appreciated as well.
All right, looks like there's a couple more coming.
And then while they make their way, I do see a hand raised from somebody on the phone. So your last 4 digits are 4332. So once we get done done with this person taking their comment, we'll go to you. So if you want to just be ready for that.
Hi, my name is Ashira Jones, and I am a resident at River Park Apartments. We have not received no notification, no warning or anything about the plant. And it is well needed.
Thank you so much for your comment. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. So I'm going to go to the phones here for just a second, Allie. If you have anybody else and you want to have them stand by, I would appreciate that. So again, we've got our last four digits of your phone number, 4332. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. You should be able to talk.
Hi, I'm Patty
Yes.
Alstrom.
We can hear you.
And
Oh.
you can't?
No, I can hear you. I'm sorry about that. Go right ahead with your comment. And if you wouldn't mind just repeating your name one more time and then go ahead with your comment when you're ready.
Okay. My name is Patty Alstrom, and I grew up on East Carpenter Road. Now I'm living there again. We had 4 gentlemen in this immediate neighborhood live to well in their 90s. One of them was my father. And I don't think had we had an asphalt plant, that would have happened. And I agree with the lady saying that this is going in a poor section of Flint and almost targeting the poor people. And I'm really, really concerned about this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to make a comment tonight. Elliot, I know you had a couple more folks, so if you would like to get them ready and then go ahead and unmute whenever you're ready, I'd appreciate that too.
All right, we are ready to go.
Go right ahead. Just make sure they say their name if you don't mind before they get started on their comment.
Hi, my name's Lathan Jefferson. I live at G6190 North Dort Highway, which is about a quarter of a mile from here. But in this area, in this neighborhood, I've worked my ice cream truck in this area since 1976. Okay, and is considered a low-income area. There's a 1968 civil rights law said that that wood burning plant was not allowed to be built over there under a 1968 civil rights law. The EPA allowed them to build it. They turned around and allowed them to have a painting line. We tried to dispute that. They turned around and allowed them a second line. Now you're wanting to allow them to put in a power plant. So it's like, to me, the EPA says it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right, like the governor said about our water. It's not, it's just rain, but we were being pissed on. Now you want to piss on this community. And I don't agree with it. The only thing I right now want to know is, what is the address to the Civil Rights Department in Washington, D.C. and the Justice Department of Washington, D.C. under the Disabilities Act, because that's how this needs to be filed if you want to allow this plant to go in. Now, here's what happens with these plants. They come in and they put some money in somebody's hand, and they go in and they fight for the people to negotiate this to get it put in. When in Flint, we had the garbage contract. Somebody got some cash money put in their pocket. And this is the way these things work. These people have already made a purchase on this land. Why would you make a purchase on this land and you're not going to get a contract on it? So it's already been bought. With the scrap haulers, the scrap yards in Lansing, their attorneys come in and the state reps clean off the chairs. Here, set right here. This is the way this works. So this whole thing is not right. Put it someplace else. In Flint, they have industrial parks where General Motors was. All of Buick City. Why don't they move and go over there? This is how I feel about this. The EPA, you did such a shitty job on the water thing, you changed your name. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cuss, but you changed your name to Eagle. When I called Washington, D.C., they said, they looked it up and they said, oh, they're Eagle now. They're not the EPA anymore. The health department has done a study on the people of asthma in this zip code. They gave it to their supervisors and they never heard any more about it. I know the lady was the asthma specialist that did the study. But you've made up your mind already to give this company this permit, but your asses don't stay out here. Am I being disrespectful? I have a mother, a grandmother, and 8 daughters. I respect women, but I don't respect anybody that stands up and tries to help them with this. Let your kids come live out here.
Mr. Jefferson, you have about 30 more seconds for your comment, just to let you know.
But like I said, that's the way things have went in the past. When we filed the first complaint 19 years ago, under the Obama administration, they got back with us 16 years later. That's the way these things work. You've already granted them the permit, but let them go someplace with it. Let them go in your community. I'm quite sure there's a vacant lot next to your house. Am I being disrespectful to you? Yes, I am, and anybody else that's trying to help them with this.
Mr. Jefferson, your time is up. Did you want to have one more closing part of your comment, or are you completed?
Nah, it'll only get nastier.
Okay, thank you very much. We do appreciate your comment.
You appreciate that, don't you?
I do. Thank you so much. Allie, do you have anyone else in the queue there to give a comment?
Yep, we've got one more person.
Okay, that sounds great.
My name is Ted Zarfeld. I'm with the Flint Coalition for Environmental Justice. And we strongly suggest that EGLE comply with the terms of the 2017 EPA Title VI order and the 2019 resolution agreements by taking immediate steps to ensure that the public has an adequate opportunity to have meaningful input into this permit process. In a January 19, 2017 letter, EPA file number 01R-94-R5 from EPA to MDEQ, which is now EGLE, they stated plainly that EGLE was violating Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. And I'll quote from that: "A finding a discriminatory treatment of African Americans by MDEQ in the public participation process for the GPS," that was a Genesee Power Station permit, "considered and issued from 1992 to 1994. And GPS is located," end of quote, "GPS is located in an identical neighborhood in which the proposed Ajax asphalt plant is requiring a permit. And it appears to us that EGLE is doing the same thing they did 29 years ago." Now, in that same letter, EPA provided next steps regarding action that EPA will expect the MDEQ, now EGLE, to take in resolution of the Flint complaint, and which were previously conveyed to MDEQ, which focuses on improve MDEQ's public participation program to reduce the risk of future disparate treatment. Number 2, improve MDEQ's development and implementation of foundational non-discriminatory program that establishes appropriate procedural safeguards while addressing civil rights complaints, and well as policies and procedures for ensuring access for persons with disability and limited English proficiency to MDEQ programs and activities. Number 3, ensure that MDEQ has an adequate process in place for addressing environmental complaints. In addition, this letter, EPA makes this specific recommendations, MDEQ. And it looks like you may have made some policy changes, but you've taken no action. You're doing the same thing again you did before. And again, I repeat, we strongly suggest that EGLE clean up its act and comply with the terms of the 2017 EPA Title VI order and the 2019 resolution agreements by taking immediate steps to ensure that the public has an adequate opportunity to have a meaningful input into this permitting decision. And that would be by extending the public comment period beyond the 17th. We'd like to formally request that that be extended to September 21st. We also formally request that an in-person public hearing be done right in the neighborhood where that plant is going to be located. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zarfeld, for your comment. Ellie, do you have anyone else there who would like to make a comment?
I think we have one more person.
Okay, that sounds great. And if anybody else that's on with us online, if you would like to make a comment, there's still plenty of time if you want to just raise your hand, and then you'll be the next on the list.
Hi, everyone. This is Mona Monroe Eunice from the Environmental Transformation Movement of Flint, ETM Flint. I'm a Flint resident and also deeply concerned about environmental justice, in part because my family, like everybody's, was extremely harmed by the water crisis. I have an autoimmune disease as a result of the water, and I want to speak to the environmental justice aspects and the quality of life aspects of this permit, because Eagle should be considering quality of life and how this plant will affect it. And it states that in the permit, in the general instruction. So I think this is applicable, even though it's not a technicality that I'm speaking to. When you're dealing with health impacts that will affect Flint residents, you have to understand that this is not your typical community. We have layers of health issues here that are pre-existing. After the incinerator, I started hearing, the incinerator goes back 30 years, but I've heard people who've lived in this area far longer than 30 years saying how after the incinerator started operating, they started having breathing problems. So many people I talked to in this neighborhood, right around the incinerator and right where Ajax is proposing to have its asphalt plant, have asthma, have all kinds of breathing problems, and on top of that, have autoimmune and other issues related to the water crisis. So I think there needs to be some consideration for that, because this is not, I mean, like I said, it's just layers of health issues. And I'm really scared about this plant, to be honest with you, because so many people will be affected. Also, the other side, so there's, people in, this plant is located in Genesee Township. And so there has been no due process really for people on the Flint side. And part of that is because any due process that would have happened at the local level would only happen within Genesee Township, right? But most of the people living in the area are on the Flint side. And then you have the importance of our local parks, which is in addition to other housing units on the north side of the proposed site, there's also areas with Genesee County parks. And that's significant because one of the ways that we are combating the effects of lead poisoning is to make sure that people of all ages have access to recreation, healthy recreation. And if we put more plants in the area, we're compromising that strategy to overcome the effects of lead. So again, I can't stress enough that there are just so many people here already with asthma, and people point to the incinerator as the cause of that. And I'm just really scared for the health of people, what will happen if this plant comes. I also concerns about the impact on quality of life.
Mona, I'm letting you know that you've got about 30 more seconds. I just wanted to make sure that you knew where you are with things.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. I appreciate that. Yeah, so I just want to say that this area is also severely disinvested. We have lost Carpenter Elementary School after the incinerator came in. And so, once you start having more pollution, companies move out. People stop investing in areas. And this is in North Flint that's affected. And it's one of the areas of the city that has the greatest disinvestment. And we're working really hard at the local level to turn that around. But that's not gonna, having an asphalt plant here is gonna just make it really hard for people to wanna stay. And my last point is, nobody's saying that this plant shouldn't exist, right? I just wanna be very clear about that. We all want good roads. We understand that there's infrastructure bills coming. But we want this plant to be moved be located where there aren't going to be affected people. That's the bottom line. Nobody's saying that you know, Ajax is an evil company. But what this siting of this plant is environmental racism, and we need to just be really clear about that. So who's affected is a predominantly Black community, a low-income community, and companies exploit that, right? And that's what's happening here. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mona. I really appreciate your comments tonight and appreciate you helping organize the community gathering there too. Ellie, do you have anyone else there who would like to make a comment tonight?
I don't think so.
Okay, just gonna go ahead, and I do have another hand raised here, so I'm gonna go ahead and go to the phones. All right, Lenny Sly, I'm going to unmute you. So if you can just repeat your name for the record, and we should be able to hear you now.
Yes, my name is Lenny Sly. I've been active with the Prayer Center for a number of years. I was a resident of Genesee Township for 27. What I want to refer to is an article. It was an online article. I lost the person that, oh, here, okay. Anyhow, there was an online article in July, and it referred to the RJ torching, and somebody was quoted from Eagle, and it said, "This is the facility in the area with the greatest visible impacts. It began operations in 2006, has been a source of excessive smoke emissions from their outdoor uncontrolled torch cutting activities over the years, leading to numerous complaints. ADQ was unable to resolve past opacity violations with the company, and the case was referred to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. In 2019, RJ Torching installed a homemade enclosure and filtration devices to capture and control smoke, but these do not work well enough to comply with state visible emission limits. ADQ and EPA are working to compel compliance. Well, my concern is that this is after the fact, once it has been put in, that they're not meeting that. And I would like to believe in the good faith of Ajax that they will follow everything and comply. But I think once something is put in, it's much harder to deal with that than if you either deny it in the first place or you make sure the safeguards are in place ahead of time so those things can be dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sly. I appreciate your comment. Ellie, I'm just going to go back to you for one more time there and just make sure that you don't have anybody else who would like to make a comment. And we still do have time if anybody else online would like to make a comment. We have plenty of time for you guys to raise your hand and make a comment as well. Do you have anybody else there, Ellie?
I'm not seeing anyone else.
Okay, just wanting to make sure that everybody covered. I'm gonna dilly-dally around a little bit here and just see if anybody changes their mind. So there is a couple things that while we're waiting, just to make sure that no one changes their mind, they want to give a comment here. If you are at the community meeting and you have not already given us contact information, email is the fastest way for us to get a hold of you, but if you don't have email, it's perfectly acceptable to give us your mailing address. So I think that either Mona or Allie would be more than happy to get those from folks and pass them back to us so that once a permit decision is made, in this case, we can report back out appropriately to everybody who is interested. Obviously, Allie and Mona will be notified, and Mr. Zarfeld as well. So there'll be a lot of members of the community that will be notified directly, but we want to make sure we reach as many people as possible. So not seeing any other hands raised, we do have a couple other things that we need to do tonight. We may leave at any time, but I'm going to go ahead and officially close the hearing. So that involves me reading another statement to all of you. So thank you so much for taking the time to participate in this meeting tonight. We do greatly appreciate your interest in protecting Michigan's air quality. As indicated at the beginning of the hearing, the public comment period will close at midnight on September 7, 2021. all interested parties, anyone who provided comments during the public comment period, and anyone who attended this public hearing or the other one or the comment session that we had at the Township Hall will be directly notified of the final decision on the proposed permit. The hearing is now closed, so thank you again for your attendance tonight. I did have a couple other things that I wanted to go over. If you want to stick around, like I said, you can leave if you want to, but I wanted to just quickly go over the ways that folks can continue to provide comments to us. If you go home tonight and you thought, you know what, I didn't make a comment, but now I really feel like I want to, there's plenty of ways still to do that. So you can send us a note in the mail, and that's going to go to Annette Switzer, our permit section manager. That's at EGLE, and it's EGLE. AQD stands for Air Quality Division. As long as you have the PO Box 30260 in Lansing, Michigan, and the zip code as 48909, we'll get that. So don't worry about that. And then if you want to just send us an email, that email address is eagle-AQD-PTI-public-comments@Michigan.gov. And I know we have some people on the phone, so I'm going to go ahead and just spell that out in case folks want to write it down. So it's Eagle, E as in elephant, G as in glue, L as in Luke, E as in elephant, dash, A as in apple, Q as in queen, D as in dog, dash, P as in Paul, T as in Tom, I as in igloo, and then the words public comments. So PTI public comments is all one word, and it's at Michigan, all spelled out, .gov as in government. One of the easiest ways that you can leave a comment for us is just call our public comment voicemail. So that number is 517-284-0900. And then we're very, very thankful that the St. Francis Prayer Center has agreed to collect any written comments that community members would like to drop off. If that's easier for you, please drop them off by the time they close on Tuesday. And Mr. Zarfeld, I may be fibbing about this, but I believe that the web on the internet, it said you guys close at 4. So if you can try to get things there by then, that would be great, since the comment period does end at midnight on the 7th, at least as of right now. So I wanted to just thank you guys again for being willing to do that. It's always wonderful for us when community can do that. It's really, really helpful. There's other information that you can find if you're interested. If this was the first time that you heard about this, or this is the first time coming to one of these hearings and you're not really sure what even other information you might want, you can first of all call Amber, and I will give her contact information out in just a second here, especially for those on the phone. I don't want to, repeat everything, but all of the information, if you have access to the internet, is available at Michigan.gov/EGLEAirPublicNotice. So we've just updated that page. So we're putting all of our public notice information on one page. And we did get a really great comment from Mona. So Mona, I hope that you go back to the webpage maybe at noon tomorrow. We're updating some stuff. Your comment was greatly appreciated. We're including some buttons on the top, and I call them buttons, something to click, that's going to make it easier to see how many different permits we have open for comment, because we very often have more than one at a time. So it was a great comment, greatly appreciated. Anything that can help us improve our process is very, very welcome. So again, that website is Michigan.gov/EGLEAirPublicNotice, and EGLEAirPublicNotice is all one word, not one world. So I promised to give out some contact information for folks. So if you're seeing this on the screen right now, I'm going to give you a second to write this down. And Dan, please verify that I have your phone number correct, because I just kind of had a panic moment. And if you can unmute yourself and just say, yes, it's correct, or no, it's not, Jennifer, I'd really appreciate it, because I know we had it wrong on the first, during the first hearing, and I just want to make sure. Is it looking good?
Yes, it is correct, Jennifer.
Okay, good.
So
All
good
right.
work.
Thank you. I just panicked for a second. I thought, oh my gosh, I don't want to give out the wrong number for Dan again. He's a great person to talk to, especially for folks who maybe have concerns or want other information about facilities around where Ajax is proposing, Dan does not inspect every facility around there, but he has a great knowledge of the community and of the sources that are there. And if he isn't the one that inspects the source that you are interested in, he can definitely help you get to the right person. So you can pop Dan an email, as the last name is McGean, and it's M as in Mary, C as in cat, G as in green, E as in elephant, E as in elephant, N as in Nancy, and then the letter D. So McGean D at Michigan, all spelled out, .gov as in government. And his phone number is 517-648-7547. So hopefully that was not too fast for folks that might be wanting to write it down. And then if you want to have any questions for Amber about the proposed permit, please feel free to give her a shout as well. And her last name is Brown. So it's just the word Brown, the letter A, and then the number 39. So Brown A39 at Michigan.gov. And her direct line is 517-648-6216. If you are interested in anything else that we have not gone over tonight and you are looking to get a hold of somebody at Eagle, or if you have a pollution emergency, one of the great ways to get a hold of us at all hours, if you do have a pollution emergency and you think something is really going on and you want to let us know, please feel free to call our emergency number, and that is 800-292-4706. So I know I threw a lot of contact information at you. If you got any one of those, all of us are more than happy to point you in the right direction, chat with you, lead you to the information that you're looking for. More than happy to do that, like I said. So the recording of tonight's meeting will soon be on Eagle's YouTube channel, and our YouTube channel is just youtube.com/Michigan Eagle. Like I said before, the hearing from the other day is also on there. The other day wasn't the other day, it was over a month ago. So I apologize for that. On the 3rd, that's already on there. So if you want to kind of see what questions were asked before, they're definitely there. So if you want to drop those comments off at the prayer center, that's great. If you want hard copies of some of the information that we were talking about, the proposed project summary, which is that kind of high level overview, the draft permit conditions, there's definitely ways that we can get those to you. Give us a call and we'll figure out how to do it. We'll either connect with the prayer center to get some for you, or see if there's a way that we can get somebody to meet up with you to get those. So that's kind of what I have for you tonight. Greatly appreciate the time. Really appreciate Mona, Allie, you guys for putting together the community gathering so folks could participate in the hearing tonight. That was really lovely that you could do that. So again, we appreciate your comments tonight. I know Marianne does as well. Just a reminder that comment period midnight on September 7th. So anything that you want to get us before that is greatly appreciated. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting for now, but like I said, if you have any other questions, inquiries, or need more information, please do feel free to reach out to us. Thanks a lot, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.